season post-show thoughts. This is going to be a loaded conversation. It's probably going to go in many different directions, but I'm super excited to have him on here today. So just going to give people a second to drop in, and then we'll get this going here. Hopefully he joins within the next couple minutes. He said that I got the time zones mixed up. I was like, brother, it's like, come on. For context, my coach is Canadian. So the Canadian guys are on the PST time zone, which is about 3 hours behind EST. So sometimes, I mean, when I was over there, like I was doing the same thing, fucking up the time zones all the time. So I'm doing well. I'm what's the word I'm looking for? I think post prep, there's a lot of emotions that come with that. And for me specifically right now, like it took me a couple days to just let myself chill out. But now that I am, I'm just like I'm really enjoying it. This week I'm not training at all. I'm not doing any cardio, just strictly steps, getting some food in, just letting the body recharge a little bit after being in prep and competing for the last 8 months. Even the last like 2 years being really dialed. I can't remember the last time I took a full week off. So I'm just excited and I'm dropping into giving myself the week off from training. It's a deload essentially to allow my nervous system to recover a little bit, drop some fatigue, drop some inflammation, and really just give my body a break before we go hammer it this off season. TikTok, how are you guys? Tess, what's going on? Thank you guys for tuning in. Yeah, I figured I'd just drop in and wait a couple minutes while Coach gets on here, and we'll just we'll chop it up, have a good time. Josh, did we get you in the course, brother? I don't remember if we chatted about that yesterday. How's TikTok doing? Do you guys know what I do? Do you guys want it? You want the rundown on what it is? Damn, I'm like crashing a little bit. Yeah, so for context, maybe those who are new here, I'm a competitive bodybuilder. I'm a online coach. Been coaching now for almost 5 years. A couple of weeks will be 5 years since I started my coaching business, which is crazy. Super thankful to be able to say that. A lot of ups and downs the last few years, but we're here, man. We're here. We're blessed to be able to continue to do what we do and help other people. But yeah, I think being able to step back and let myself recharge a little bit, I'm feeling how much stress my body was under. You know, the low food, the hours of cardio, the lack of sleep. Gotta say, it feels really good to catch up on some sleep and get some food in me and get off of the stairs. There's no guilt for me not training this week because I know that it's the necessary thing for me to do to head into the next chapter. Check on him really quick. There we go. Cool. Who's here with me live? Drop a yes in the comments. I'm about to record a live podcast with my coach, specifically. For those who are new here, I'm a bodybuilder, bro. That's what we do. Alexis, what's going on? How are you guys? Drop a win. Let me know. Tune in. Tap in. What's good? Do you guys know what we're covering here today on this podcast? Let me know. Drop some guesses down below what you guys think we're going to cover here today. It's going to be a good one, I promise. I'm going to cover a lot of ground. I want to engage with you guys a little bit. Josh, what do you think we're talking about here today, brother? These vibes. Clay Will. User 621. Frank the Tank. What's up, my man? How are you guys? Yes, I'm an active bodybuilding competitor. If you're on Facebook, you might be able to see behind me the medals and trophies that we kill ourselves for. So funny how we spend so much time, effort, and energy just to get those little plaques. You know, it's funny how it works. What was I going to say? It's not for the trophies, though. We do it for ourselves and our families and our careers, and you know, just being able to test our limits to show what's possible. And that's what I do. That's why I do it. But we might talk about this in the episode as well of you know, my future as far as competing and what that looks like. So we might get into that. We'll see. Dillon, what's up? How are you guys? Who here is into fitness? Let me know. Drop a yes in the comments below. Nicki Minaj. Perfect. Love it. Dun, 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 dun. Who on TikTok? We got 10 of you guys. You guys are really quiet. Who's into fitness here? It's funny because nobody will talk until one person says something, and then the chat box will open up. How can I get lean while still being strong? Ooh, this is a good question. Shoot me a DM and I can help you out, George. But I think that's about having the right game plan in store for you. Oh, my watch almost died. I think that's about having the right game plan. So I'd need a little bit more information to answer that for you. Oh, let's see. Big Dog's in the chat box. Let's go. Yup. Let's make sure we got the audio cooking here. Let's see what we got. I can't wait to hear that Canadian accent.
Up, my bro?
Hey, what's going on, brother? How are you?
Not too bad. I'm gonna fix this lighting here. 1 second here.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Shit's all screwed up.
Got to make sure that audio is crisp.
That's better.
Nice, bro.
Anyway,
How does my mic sound?
you sound great, bro.
Good. I love that. Okay, awesome. Did you need anything else before we drop in?
I don't think so, bro. I think I'm good to go.
We'll get it going here. Appreciate you hopping on, Big Dog. It's going to be a good time. So yeah, I mean, I have some of those questions, but we'll just go with the flow here. We'll see how it goes. All right.
Yeah, and I don't mind if we go off that or whatever else you want, bro. It's fine.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
I might turn my IG live on, maybe like piece through it or something like that. But
yeah, why don't you do that right now? I'll give you a second. I'm not in a rush. I have a solid hour or so here, so.
Perfect. I got at least 45 as well. 10:45. Yeah.
Perfect. Josh, the hardest part of my prep was the last month when we got down to 30 grams of carbs and I was killing myself on the stairs. That was definitely no joke. It's a good question. We'll probably talk about that a little bit here in just a second.
Are you on live too?
Yeah, I got a couple platforms up. I was just warming them up. I was buttering them up while you were coming in.
I got you here. Just 1 second here.
Yeah, I got a couple of phones.
A couple phones. It's perfect.
Yeah, I got TikTok here, Instagram, and then I got Facebook, YouTube. I'm on fucking LinkedIn right now too, bro.
I love that for you. You're going home. You're going home.
Someone's got to do it.
Yeah, there we go. Okay, I'm gonna get mine rolling too.
Okay.
Why not? 3, 2, 1. And I am live. So I'm actually doing a podcast with my friend and clientele. We're going to be kind of diving into a little bit of questions about his prep and just overall some of the things that he wanted to chat to me about. So I can tell you right now, I'm going to go turn my WhatsApp off because it's dinging out of control because today's a check-in day and I don't want that coming into the...
Oh, right.
I'm good to go, man.
Awesome, brother. Yeah, I mean, was I supposed to check in today? Fuck, my bad.
Not really, bro, because, we just kind of had our show and stuff.
Yeah.
I usually like to give people a week to, get their life in order. We had our reverse protocol set up and everything like that. So we have Christmas coming up as well. So
yeah,
it's a weird time of year.
Okay, sounds good. I'm gonna hit the recording. We'll drop in.
Sounds good, bro.
What is going on, fam? Welcome back to another episode of the Shift Your Mind, Change Your Life podcast. Today, I'm joined by my coach, Big Dillon. What's up, Big Dog? How are you?
I'm doing well, man. How are you doing, bro?
I'm doing well. Thanks for hopping on. What I always like to do when we first start off, brother, is just like a quick, 30 seconds to a minute intro. Who are you? Where you're from? That sort of thing. They might not know. So I think it would be good to start there, and then we'll get into some of the things that we chatted about here today.
Sure. I'll try not to talk about myself too much. I get worse as I get older. When I was younger, embarrassingly and admittingly, I kind of liked this. It would be like, oh, it's an opportunity for me to tell how smart I am or what I've done.
Right.
And as you do a little bit more, it starts to get more awkward. But anyway, my name's Dillon. I've been a full-time coach for just about 12 years now. So a very long time. And I went through a transformation myself once upon a time losing 150 pounds after a pretty bad accident. And that's what essentially developed the love I have for fitness, because fitness kind of saved my life and changed my life. And I've gone through many different phases. You know, as I told you, the first 5 years of my career, I kind of worked my way up to the top of obesity coaching. Second 5 years you could look at is like working my way up to the top of functional health coaching, which is a fancy term for folks who have undiagnosed autoimmune, gut health, you know, brain fog, sexual libido, physical issues that haven't been able to be solved through conventional methods, and we're using functional medicine and or supplementation to do that.
Right.
Sometimes including pharmacology if necessary, and then working my way up into the top ranks of Canadian bodybuilding coaching. How we kind of connected, obviously, is through that piece of my journey. But,
yeah.
It's been a lot of fun, man. So I've kind of done it all. And one thing that I can say is everyone told me way back when that I should niche down. You know, like, oh, just do this thing. And they're like, you're just an obesity coach. And they used to piss me off. They're like, well, what do you mean? That person over there is doing something, and they're just a man or woman. And I have the same skin cell, hair cells, brain function as them, and if they can do it, so can I.
Right.
So it got me really curious to try and learn a bunch, and that served me very well, because now I can work with pretty much anybody, to be honest.
Yeah, and you're confident doing so. It's awesome, bro. Thank you for sharing that. And yeah, I think we're approaching our second year working together. You know, we've been together for a while. We just did our second show this past weekend, which was awesome. And yeah, just for a little bit more context before we drop into some of the other questions, this man has taught me a lot, not only about my own fitness journey, but also a lot of the spirituality side of things, you know, and also just connecting on some deeper topics when it comes to the masculine, feminine, the relationship side of things, and a lot of other stuff, and even just business stuff too, man. You know, helping my clients as well. He's been a rock in a lot of that. With that being said, bro, I think a perfect place to start would be reflecting on this past weekend, you know, because obviously it's fresh and there's, you know, a lot that goes into, you know, what we just did. So why don't we start there? Let's unpack that a little bit, talk about, you know, your honest thoughts, your feedback, and we'll dive into it a little bit more there.
Sure. I was really happy with the package that we brought, being that, and, you know, I brought this up not to kind of give you a pat on the back, because it's actually not my personality at all. Once you get to know me, I'm not very good at giving pats on the back, to be honest, because I was raised that excellence is normal, and anything underneath that was not acceptable. So one of the things that I always like to take all the context into account. And I think that sometimes we do a bad job of that, especially when there's social media pieces involved,
right? Because
we're only seeing like a percentage of what's reality. And so the fact that, you know, you've only really been bodybuilding for, you know, 2-3 years seriously, and, you know, diving into some of the more open bodybuilding stuff after a natural bodybuilding career, we've only been in for a matter of months.
Right.
It's not even been a year, essentially, just shy of, that you've taken, you know, any type of enhancements. And to be able to, in your first season with that short of a bodybuilding career, you know, and I know you trained growing up and stuff. And your followers know that, you know, you have a sporting baseball background and stuff. And so there's a good base there. But, you know, still only having a few years of really dedicated bodybuilding training, and more importantly, nutrition. Right. Than that. And then on top of that, a very small amount of enhancements to be able to work up to middle of the pack in a huge show. You know, I'm very happy with that. And is there improvements we can make? Yeah. We need a little bit more density, and we need to come in a little bit harder. Right. And this was our first contest prep season. Right. And I think that a lot of folks set their expectation that, like, they're going to do it perfect the first time. Yeah. And if not, something went wrong. Right. And that's because maybe you handled your macros perfectly, and maybe you did all this stuff perfectly. And that's fine. But the thing is you're dealing with physiology, and it doesn't always do exactly what you want when you want it, just like a simple equation. Right. So I was really proud of the way you handled yourself. And from a coach to an athlete, as a man, I'm really proud of you, the way you handled your emotions. And listen, we all want to win. I want to win. I fucking hate losing, bro. Yeah. But at the same time, you know, you never made me feel like I was doing something to you instead of for you. Right. And, you know, we kind of just took accountability for, like, hey, these couple things could have been better. Let's figure out how to fix that going into the next time. And I think that's where you can really see someone build a really good bodybuilding career, whether that's a coach or an athlete, is by, you know, finding people that care about you and learning to work through the communication that's necessary to grow.
Absolutely.
Instead of, oh, there's just a piece of contention, and now we just discard that.
Yeah. No, that was well said. And I have no problems taking accountability because I understand that it's a mutual partnership, relationship, whatever you want to call it, and it takes both of us, and there's no reason to point any fingers. We're on the same team. It doesn't make any sense. Obviously it didn't feel good to sit there and not make first or second call outs, but at the end of the day, it was a good experience to say, hey, this is the gap that we need to close if we're going to continue to do this. So it's good feedback to have. And I appreciate you saying that I handled it well, because I'm not really upset. If we objectively step back and refer to what you just said about like, hey, this is realistically the first time, it's like, you got to be a little more realistic, right? So that's cool, man. And I appreciate that. It means a lot coming from you as well.
The Razor too at that level of competition, right? Because
Crazy,
first off, there is not even there at most shows that people are familiar with, there is not even anything past second call-outs.
Right.
Never mind third, fourth, and in some of those classes, not yours, but in a couple men's physique, fifth call-outs. because there was so many 30, 40 people deep in that.
Yeah.
And we were at the top of third call-out, so kind of right at the middle of that 30 people.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, everyone looks good.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like we're talking like, oh, their hamstrings are in just a little bit more, or this is just a little bit better. They're a little bit more dense. It's not like you're getting creamed, right from top to bottom. Like 95% of people in the street would look at most of those physiques and think they're all the same. Like you know what I mean? Like unless you have a trained eye or you've been around the industry or are interested in it in general, we're splitting hairs there on what's winning, which is good. That's why competition rises to the top. The cream rises to the top.
Right. No, that's what it's all about. So to pivot a little bit, what is your honest opinion on bodybuilding? Because I know that you're more focused on coaching than competing yourself. And I find that interesting. And it's something that I've thought about too. So if you could expand on that, I think that would be useful as well.
Sure, I'll do my best. So bodybuilding, I love bodybuilding. It taught me a lot about, myself. And you and I competed in the same natural divisions and did well at different timelines in our career. I'm going to be honest with you. Because I'm a very realistic person, and I think I have good sense anyway, or common sense. And so once I started to coach a bunch of people, let's say 5 years into my career, which would have been at the very end of my own bodybuilding journey, right. 2018, last time I competed. I knew what I was doing. I knew I had good guidance, and not to say that I couldn't do better now in retrospect to certain things, but I knew how hard I was working, and I've always been a very hard worker. And we know what we're up to. Like only Sal knows what stupid things he does or doesn't do, and myself included.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew after many years of not literally, I was the asshole, not bringing. I was bringing Tupperwares to Christmas, and I was living the way that a lot of the greatest bodybuilders pretend that they're living, because that's the influences that I was getting.
Right.
And I remember going to my first Arnold and being invited to the Arnold after party, and I hadn't drank in 2-3 years. I hadn't eaten out, I think, in 8 months, bro. Wow. And that's how dialed I was. And I was 150 pounds soaking wet, and I trained really hard. I was training with a lot of enhanced guys that were big. I was like a little Wolverine. And so I started to train a lot of people and realized, holy smokes, some people just start lifting weights and they're more jacked than me.
Yeah.
And I know they're not training near as hard as I am and for as long as I've been already.
Right.
And I started to see that across men and women. And then I also saw people more like me. We're oh, they need 2 years to see quantitative change, to where I could put the photos side by side and it's oh, there's a pretty good change there.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, that was the first clue. The second clue is when I went to the Arnold, and I thought, at this time, I was very naive. I'm looking up to all these YouTube people, and social media wasn't as honest as it is now,
right?
Especially with all the PEDs and things like this. And I remember thinking, going into this one club in Columbus, and it was packed. And I went in there, and every bodybuilder pretty much who had just competed, people I looked up to, are doing massive amounts of recreational drugs, alcohol, eating like crazy. And I was what the hell, these guys talk about never doing that ever.
Right.
And then I thought, well, it's the Arnold, maybe they're celebrating, so I kind of wrote it off. But because of that, I started to pay attention. And then I realized, oh, this is a lot of what bodybuilding is genetics and the risk tolerance to how much PEDs you want to take and how much your body can handle taking set amount of PEDs for the duration that it needs to take. Not so much in the more feminine divisions of feminine bodybuilding, but if we're talking bodybuilding, specifically talking to you as a classic physique competitor and and or bodybuilding above that, those two things are huge pieces of it.
Right.
And so for me, knowing that my brain is the best gift that I have, knowing that taking high dose PEDs for very long periods of time, knowing how bad my physical genetics were, I knew that, like, okay, for me to be a mediocre bodybuilder, and I've played with this path before and I saw what happened, I had to do things that I wasn't comfortable doing just to have like a 210, 15-pound physique.
Right.
And, I thought to myself, like, I'm going to be way better served to use this brain, use this vision to be able to help people. And I'll add one last piece to that. A lot of the criticism that has come from me, and I welcome criticism. It's made me a better person, right? So when someone attacks me, I'm very self-aware. And so I'm like, well, maybe I am being stupid over there. Maybe I should look at that, because if someone says that, or I can say, no, that's a nonsense person and just move on, because I can be honest with myself.
Right.
That was like, well, if you're not a great competitor, then how are you going to coach great competitors? What does great competitor mean? In bodybuilding, right, it doesn't mean that I have the best genetics, no, etc. But like, I would argue that few people in the fitness industry in Canada have built what I've built over 10 years. And from a variety of metrics. And all that life experience probably makes me a pretty good guide, especially because I'm a little bit more intellectual as far as a personality trait. Bodybuilding is anti-intellectual. Most people that are drawn to bodybuilding are anti-intellectual. They don't like it. It makes them uncomfortable. Anti-intellectual also isn't intelligence. Those aren't the same thing. It's a trait marker, meaning I like deep things and I like to pull things apart. Most people in bodybuilding like to pretend and put things in the closet. So it's very different. And so I was speaking about things my whole career that maybe others were uncomfortable to speak about.
Right.
And as you get into that, you just learn that, like, it actually works really well with very driven athletes. How many times in your prep did you tell me, like, bro, I should just be cutting out, like, way before we had to, I should just cut out this food? And so the analogy that I came to is most highly driven athletes want to run their head into the wall too much.
Yeah.
And so if they have another person who's telling them, just keep running your head into the wall because that's the type of person they are, I don't think that that's the best synergy.
Right.
I think me taking a bird's eye view and being like, hey, I know why you want to do that, and maybe there will be a time for that, but here's why we should maybe do this other thing. What do you think? Right? And so that gives me a different perspective, because I didn't just have building a physique very easily. This physique that I have is as not great as it was built by a lot of hard work.
Right.
And so, I didn't get an easy way out in any direction that I took.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack there. And that was really one of the biggest questions that I wanted to ask you today, because obviously, that's something that I'm teetering with as well, is like, like, what is the overall purpose of getting a pro card? Like, does that make you a better coach? And we were talking about that, and it doesn't translate. And it's just like, who are you and what do you bring to the table? And like, just being yourself and being authentic, I think, is really important there, So I think that's good for people to understand, is genetics do play a huge role when it comes to bodybuilding. And I think a lot of people don't want to accept that. Would you agree?
Yeah, but I don't know why. And I do know why, because again, bodybuilding attracts a lot of ego.
Right.
And that also provides a lot of anti-intellectual approaches. And so we would never do that with basketball.
Right.
Right? Like, or football or baseball. Like, we just know it to be true. Like, Shaq is 7'3". I'm not 7'3". Therefore, I'm not going to probably be as good of a basketball player as him, no matter how much I try. And the people that have talents and gifts and grit, when they don't have those genetic gifts, they're working like people can't even imagine they're working.
Right.
It's just like, to override that is almost nearly impossible, and only a few people do it. And like, if you look at all of the best bodybuilders, all of them, Dorian, you can go to any timeline. Dorian, Arnold, so we go 70s, 80s, 90s, Jay Cutler into the 2000s, Keon just posted something a little while ago into the current timeline. At 14 to 15, they were like 185 with abs and cap delts.
Crazy.
From like 6 months in the gym. Like, I'm 185 with abs and calf delts, or 190 now. Like that took me 10 years to do.
Right.
Most men are between 150 to 100 kind of 70 pounds if they were lean, right? And you start seeing these guys, and even my business partner Braden's kind of like this. Like the dude out of high school was like 175 and pretty jacked.
Right.
It's like it took me a long time to get to that point. I was 135 and jacked, muscular appearing,
right.
When I lost weight, right? So everyone's a little bit different, and you have to accept that.
So what would you say to somebody who's like teetering the line of going from natural to enhance? Maybe they're thinking about competing. Maybe they don't think that they can really be competitive without the enhancements. What would you say to that?
Find someone that you trust to educate you on these decisions, because there's a lot that goes into it. And again, I take a different approach here because I like to take pride in the ability to cast vision and build a map. And I find that the bodybuilding industry is very short-sighted because it lives in 12 to 25 week increments. Off-season, cycle here, cutting here, and it lives in that. So that's fine, because you have to be focused on something in the now, which is part of what's beautiful of bodybuilding. But when you lose picking your head up and your shoulders back and looking to the horizon, which is a biblical reference in some sense, you lose it. You lose kind of seeing it. And I've seen so many people get hurt for choices they made in the short that affected the long. And I like to be the person that says, like, okay, you're 24 now, and that's great, and you have all these aspirations, and I'm here to push you to do that. Have you thought about what happens if we do this when you're 27, when this happens, when you're 28, when this happens, when here's the thing, you told me you wanted to see this outcome for your life. How are you going to manage this? Right. And we start to bring these questions to it. A lot of the times, people either move forward or they don't with that sort of enhancement strategy. But I like to give people a proper understanding.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's look at where you are now, where you want to go, and how we're going to do that. And then together we unpack that through a variety of series of questions, which changes depending on the person that I'm talking to.
Of course. Yeah. So it's all about just knowing where you're going. And you've helped me tremendously with that. I remember that first FaceTime call that we had when I first started working with you, and you're like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. And you mapped it all out. And I felt really comfortable and safe because I felt that, your energy was on point and you were really honest with the things that you were saying. That made me trust you. And it's huge, like you said, to have somebody that you trust and has your best interest, because the reality is that there's some coaches in the space that will just sacrifice the health of the client to get a result to make them look a certain way. Obviously I don't want to speak about anybody, but that happens. And it's unfortunate. So I appreciate you sharing that. Now, I guess to zoom out a little bit, do you see yourself doing anything else besides coaching in your life? Have you thought about this at all?
So, I mean, I'm pretty lucky that I already do, in some sense, right? Because I have a gym business. I had supplement stores that I recently exited. I have some other things kind of behind the scenes on top of that. And so I always have. And coaching is a passion to me. And I really, really enjoy it. I think it's just an amazing thing to get to kind of tag on to someone's journey, use your experience to help them navigate the troubles that they might find. And it's very rewarding. And I haven't really thought of doing anything else but coaching, but how I coach, who I coach, and where I do that has always shifted, and probably always will.
Yeah.
And I'm already starting, and this is just a prediction. I have a prediction that in the next 5 to 10 years, I probably will be working with less amounts of people for higher ticket rates, to not just help so much with fitness and nutrition, macros, sets, reps, but pulling apart people's lives deeply and helping them solve a variety of problems, which, to be honest, I've already been doing.
Yeah.
And I've been doing it for a long time. I've just been doing it under the guise as a fitness and nutrition coach because I wanted to build my skill set. And this is where I'm always playing the long game. So like the art of war, right, from Sun Tzu. And I've always known that I needed to build this skill in order to make that a reality. And so I've been essentially using the people that I have in front of me as practice / sharpening. So they're sharpening themselves against me, and I'm sharpening myself against them.
Right.
And most coaches don't view it like that. They view it from an egotistical place that I have all the answers and I'm going to give it to them. Well, if you're very subjective with coaching, right? And there's been a few times where you're like, hey, bro, I'd love some more support here. I would love you to be able to explain this to me here. And if I just sit back and say, like, well, you just have to trust me.
Right.
Or follow the plan. It's like, yeah, but if I go to give you my answer and I realize, oh, I don't really know why I'm saying that, or maybe I don't even agree with it after I flush it out between us, well, I just got less stupid.
Right.
So win-win for everybody, right? You got the explanation, you got the comfortability, we've got the bond from the close communication and the accountability from that communication, but I also got smarter.
Yeah.
Well, I know that we are what we do most of the time. So if I'm getting smarter most of the days of the week through working with hundreds of people, scale that over 10 years, now you've built something that's of high value.
Right. I couldn't agree more. And I think that's for me why I enjoy coaching so much, is because I view it from a similar lens of like, I don't know shit. Like, I'm very confident, but there's so much for me to learn every single day. And I can learn from anybody that I talk to. And I always, view conversations from that lens. And I think that's important, is to remove the ego and do that. Now, you said that you wanted to work with clients on a deeper capacity. What drew you to really take that step? Because you said you're kind of doing it, but there must have been something that kind of pushed you to do that, right?
There was, and that's a very good question, bro. It's something I haven't talked about that much.
Let's go.
Briefly, anyway. A couple things. I spent a lot of money, and I've never even talked about some of this money, but I spent probably $300,000-$400,000 on physiological and sort of biological information, let's say. So training, nutrition, and how that affects the body, all of that. And I'm not talking in one shot, but $10,000 for this mentorship, 20 for the thing, doing this thing over the course of 8-9 years would have been this time when I had this realization. And every time I would do something, I noticed myself with a certain attitude of like, now I have the magic thing. So I would do this biomechanics course that no one else could do. And there was sort of, because of the way the bodybuilding industry works, and as a younger man, I had more ego. I would think like, well, my competitors aren't doing well enough to afford this information, and I can. So I'll take in the information that gives me the leg up to know more than them. Therefore, I'll produce more results. And don't get me wrong, a lot of those things were very useful, but a lot of things that I hyper obsessed about, I noticed over a long period of time, I'm like, wait, my results haven't really gotten any better from those metrics. Well, why has my results gotten better over the course of my career then, if it's not those things, or if I don't believe it's those things?
Right.
And then the answer became very apparently clear. The deeper I was able to understand myself and fix my own stupidity, the deeper I was understanding of psychology and human behavior and what makes people tick, the deeper I understood neurology and the chemical reward system. And the more, because I'm the type of person who's always striving in my life, the more accomplishment, whether that was in business, whether that was in other areas that had nothing to do with fitness, gave me more tools in the toolbox to help people. And so I realized this is not about, we all argue that, high volume, low volume, this foods and that food. And yes, there's an individual response, and certain people are going to respond to different things better. And that's our job as coaches to flush that out. But when we're just speaking generally, it's all the same.
Right.
I could write a blueprint for 90% of the people, and if they followed it, they would get results. What they're there for is accountability and learning to see the stupid things they're doing.
Right.
Because the reason that most people don't have what they want is because they're doing stupid things, whether that's in their nutrition, whether that's in their mindset, whether that's in their life. And then I started to ask questions, deeper questions, as I started to understand psychology. And so after building a pattern on hundreds of those questions and revealing the answers, it was like, nobody ever comes to you, you'll know this as a coach, I'll put it to you this way. Nobody ever comes to you, Sal, as a coach and says, hey, coach, checking in today. The last week went really good. I got a raise at work. Me and my girlfriend were thriving in our relationship. I have some close friends who really care about me. I'm living in a great place, and I feel like my life has a bunch of meaning and purpose. And then on the weekend, I just decided to binge on my diet all weekend. I just threw the diet in the garbage. I said, I'm not doing it. Not one time, nor will there ever be one time that happens. And that's because, and then I would start to ask questions. It's like, you cheated on the diet because your relationship's in a poor state. You cheated on the diet because all week you had to force yourself to go to a job that you hate. And and or you cheated on the diet because you're living in a place that isn't supporting the type of person that you want to be. And I realized that it was all these deeper life problems, right? Because the nutrition and the training is just on top of that.
Right.
The stimuluses are coming from underneath that.
Mm.
And so when I started to dive into that and ask questions, you start to find out that most people have a lot to say or do that they're not doing. And they're drinking the poison expecting someone else to die. And so me pointing that out opens up the awareness of seeing that and being like, holy shit, I have to make some choices in order for this to change. I'm not going to be able to use, and the spirit of control will take over someone. And so they'll hyper obsess about controlling their diet, which makes them obsessive. And usually the opposite outcome happens because then they're too obsessive and they end up not staying on their diet the way that they want. But the reason they're clinging to that control is because they want to control something in their life. And everything else feels so out of control. So it's a false sense of safety and security. And when I bring this up to people, they're like, holy man, that is what I'm doing. And that's why as a coach, I've seen people leave relationships, move across the country, quit school, start school, get a new relationship, move out of their parents' house, take that up, take that pay cut, get a raise, whatever it is, because we start practicing with me communicating. Like, hey, if you're displeased with something that I'm doing, you have to tell me.
Right.
And most people have something to say and they just swallow it. And or they have to wait until resent builds up so much that now they're done already. So by the time they bring it up, it's too late. And I know that we don't need to get into it, but I know you just had an instance with a client, similar fashion.
Yeah.
Right? Because there wasn't, and even though you felt like there was the right communication and there was the right relationship, that goes to show you that there was a bunch of stuff hiding under the carpet. And as soon as there was one little stimulus that kind of made the fears of what was under that carpet for that individual seem true, it's just like, oh, I'm walking away now.
Right.
Instead of having a dialogue. Anyway.
I knew this episode was going to be good, but I was just sitting there like, damn, man, this guy is elite, you know? That's what you guys are called, right? Miller Elite. That's the team.
We were. Now we're called, we rebranded recently to Trademark Physiques.
Right.
And we kind of came up with that because the results are trademarked. Right? It's like, if you're coming to work with me, you're getting a stamp of trademark. If you do what I say, you're going to get results. No fear.
I love it, man. And like I said, you've helped me so much, not only with my own fitness journey and my own life, but also the way, you know, that I lead and guide my clients. There's been so much inside of that. We're getting towards the end here. So just a couple more questions. What keeps you working so hard? Because obviously you're very passionate about what you do. Would you say that's correlated to that?
Yes. So this is a great question. I think some people, and because I don't want to take credit for where I don't think I deserve it, and all credit to the Lord, because some people were just born with a fire inside of them that is not to be extinguished. And most people really like to stay around the campfire. This is an old, ancient story across civilizations, but some people like to walk away from it, right, and venture and see. And I'm filled with the spirit of adventure. So it's always just made me a little different. So by the time, like, what does a 12-year-old know, right? So if we take this back, right, by the time I was 12, my teachers would be asking me, like, Dillon, why are you talking in class? And I'd be like, because I'm done with this place. There's nothing here for me. And I know that some kids say that, but I really meant it. And I had it figured out, like, honestly, even as a nearly 34-year-old man looking back, my intuition there was really good. But I know that was God's intuition just telling me this isn't the path that I set you on. So my whole life, I was very willing to accept that most people were going to think I was crazy at most transition points in my life. And I was very blessed to have a father the way that I did. And granted, he wasn't perfect, nor was I, but he always taught me that you're rough enough, and if you set your mind to something, you will be able to do it. And so don't let other people tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing. We all fail at who we should be, and we need to strive to who we're supposed to be, right? And so those are two different things, although they sound very similar. And I like creating, I like building. And I just told you this. I just went on my first vacation that didn't include work. I've traveled a lot because my job has been kind of social and remote, right? So, there's different things. And I've traveled a lot. I've seen a lot of the world. I'm very, very blessed. But I've never taken like a vacation ever. Like where it's like, oh, just go to Mexico and just hang out. I went for 5 days, which was already a shortened trip from the 7 or 8 that my family was there, because I was flying to Dallas on the Friday to spend the weekend with you for your show.
Right.
By day 3, I'm like, okay, but like I've seen it now. Like I loved going swimming. I love the ocean. I love nature, bro. I grew up in nature. But it's like, what are we building? What are we doing?
Right.
And so I don't think there's a right or wrong. Most people view their lives as like a mile wide and an inch deep. Mine is flipped.
Right.
Mine is like an inch wide and a mile deep. I like 3 or 4 things, and I want to core them to the middle of the earth. And when I do, I'll just replace them with something else.
Where do you think that comes from?
Okay, I have mine. I'm not sure, dude. I think a lot of legacy and responsibility was put on me very young, and I knew that I was changing generational curses from the time I was 11 years old. I have big shoes to fill.
Wow.
And, with that comes the ability to get uncomfortable. And I'll be honest, I think there's a piece of me that kind of likes that as I get more and more developed, less people are likely to follow. And I've never wanted to be a part of the mass, the crowd, even when I was young, and things that I didn't even understand then. So some of it is just worked into my personality for sure. But then seeing that you can literally beat most people from just not quitting.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so the same people, there's been mobs of people throughout my career try to attack what I've built, right? Other professionals or stuff. And you know where most of them are? Non-relevant, non-existent 10 years later. And those were the people that were quote unquote beating me.
Right.
But what they saw was the spirit of vigor. And they wanted to punish that out of me because they could sense, humans are very smart. They could sense that like, this one's not going to stop. And he's going to be a problem for potentially me. And when specifically fitness industry is a lot of scarcity mindset.
Right.
And so when you view things as threats instead of collaborations, it sets you up to think that people are taking something from you when in fact they're not. We're in more control of our own path than what we might think.
Right. So you mentioned from an early age you had that fire. Do you think that that's something that is like God given? Like where does that come from? I'm genuinely curious because that's fascinating to me.
It comes, yes, partially. So I try to, I don't usually talk about this stuff on fitness-based podcasts, more lifestyle stuff, but I'll shoot it up with you for sure.
Okay.
By the time I was like 6 or 7 years old, I was brought into a basement and shown a book that is a family legacy book that is about 800 years old. So I know what every generation has done, almost like how the Bible is put together by stories through different timelines.
Yeah.
I know exactly what my family was doing 800 years ago and what they suffered to get our family to where it was now.
Wow.
And so I know the war from England to France and the mitigation, and then the France mitigation to Canada. And I know all of these things. And so greatness was a part of my legacy. And I was taught that was very important. So some of it was being a very creative, having a very interesting mix of personality traits. So I'm very high in openness to experience. I'm very high in trait intellectuality. And I'm also very high in trait conscientiousness, which essentially means how diligent you're going to do something. And that mix of those three is rare to have all three of those high.
Yeah.
So that makes me highly creative and highly driven.
Right.
But on the tyrannical end of that, it can make you highly manic. And so that's why I border that line of mania. I can admit it, right?
Yeah.
And I've always tried to, because of that, I've always had to orient myself in the yin and the yang. So I'm trying to border the line between order and chaos. And that's where I like to live. I don't like too much chaos, and this is everybody, and I don't like too much order. But particularly, I would rather chaos than order.
Right.
And I think some of us drift to one side of that equation a little more than the other. We have a natural bias to where we're going to miss. And so I would rather throw myself in the fire and figure it out. And I had an interesting upbringing, bro. Like, look, okay, so I'm going to ask you a question, then I want to give you a little bit. We got some time, and I got a little more time because that's no big deal.
Yeah.
Let's say you were like, and I know you grew up with like strict Italian parents, you know, so like, and loud people. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of the underlying messages were the same, but how they got delivered is where there's going to be some uniqueness.
Mhm.
So if I said to you, hey, you went home after school and your dad told you, hey, did you do your schoolwork? Did you do your chores? Whatever it is. And you said no. And then usually what a kid does, especially if they have some strict parents, they start to try to explain why that is.
Right.
Let's say, right? So you just walk me through like 20, 30 seconds. You didn't do your stuff. What's the process of that with you and your dad, let's say? And you think like, okay, well, I got to make up something to tell him like I didn't take out the garbage or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
What is that interaction like?
Yeah, I mean, like, for example, like if I didn't do homework, like I think when I was younger, I didn't really have the guts to be honest. A lot of times, you know, you make excuses and you lie, but usually what happens is the truth always comes out and it ends up being worse. And then, you know, you learn the lesson the hard way that you should have just been truthful and honest. And that's been something that I take into, you know, my adult life now, is that, you know, when you try to take shortcuts and make excuses and lie and cheat and steal, it always comes out. So now for me, it's just, you know, walking the path with God and just being truthfully honest and being a good person, doing the right thing. It's allowed me to see a lot of success for that reason, because all the times in the past that I haven't done that, it runs into issues. And now that also is just like, you know, me having the peace of every single day knowing that I'm doing that, and it makes me feel good inside. So I don't know if that answers it, but that's kind of my approach on that.
It sort of does, and I think you'll even get it more when I give my answer. So in that process, because kids are all the same, they're trying to they're taking the path of least resistance.
Yeah,
so,
right.
Especially if there's something scary on the other side. And my dad he ruled with an iron fist. And so I grew up like it was 1550 Sparta. And if I had said that, so I would lie sometimes too, like every other kid, but usually I knew my dad was going to say no because he was very intelligent, so there would be no time before I was caught. If I said no, and there was other words that followed that, there was one of two outcomes: massive amounts of violence or the threat of violence. And so it would be violence inflicting. Now we're not talking about it, but that was like a more rare case. The normal outcome was, and using like word for word stuff, right? So, oh, I see what you're doing. You're back talking now, and so that must mean that you're a man and you know how the world works,
right?
And I view that as a threat to the king. So that means if you're going to take me on, you're going to do so physically. So my dad would challenge me to physical combat. And from the time I was about 12 till the time I was about 16, and 15-ish, 15, almost 16, before I left home very young. I knew that was I would go into a conversation knowing I was going to talk back, knowing I was going to have a threat of physical violence that I was going to lose. And so I got used to getting knocked down and getting back up, getting knocked down and getting back up. And so the entrepreneurial journey is very much like that. And so that actually was conditioning me in a very weird way for the life that I eventually grew to build. And as I found my relationship with the Lord, I'll tell you one thing right now. I'm only bringing this up because it's very useful as I get into my mid-30s. I spent a lot of time, my mid-20s, in my 20s in general, being very resentful about some of the things that I had went through. And I'm telling you right now, and my dad would tell me this, like, when you get older, you'll understand.
Right.
And I'm not perfect, but this is going to set you up for a different look at the world and probably different outcomes. And he was right. So I'm grateful for it now.
It's beautiful, brother. Thank you for sharing that. And that's something that lands for me as well. You know, you might not see it right now, but it always pans out the way that it needs to, you know, so that's incredible.
I call those God moments.
Yeah, they are.
In retrospect, almost all of the things that happen to us that are poor or that we view as poor, later we change our perspective on.
Right.
And so I kind of try to take the attitude of like, we'll see. So now when something happens that's negative, it's like, well, I don't really know how that's going to affect me in the long term of the timeline. So I'm keeping my heart open to the spirit of adventure, and we'll see.
So is that essentially what faith means to you?
So this is very interesting. And I realized one thing, that I wasn't walking with the Lord most of my life, I grew up in a very religious household, but that's not the same thing as a faithful household.
Right.
Oftentimes, what a religious household does is preaches a bunch of things that it doesn't actually do, because acting it out in the world is much more difficult than just saying it,
right?
Or believing. But then, as I got into more psychophysiology, I started to realize, what does belief mean exactly? Well, belief is how you act yourself out and what you say into the world and what it manifests, right? So if someone tells me that, they believe something, and then I watch all of their actions, and I'm like, well, no, you don't believe it, because what you believe is what you'll actually act out. Right. So the reason that you act out keeping on top of your health and fitness is because you believe that that's a better stimulus and outcome for your life.
Right.
And if someone says that they believe that, but they're not doing it, no, you don't actually believe it.
Right.
Yet you still believe in something else. There's a spirit that's consumed you that has your belief system. And so the Lord had his hand on me my entire life, and I'm very grateful that he kept me out of it. He let me get very close to the fire, and I can see very clearly where he steered me away, where he was like, not this one. This one's not going down those dark paths. And I did go down some dark ones, but not as dark as they could have been.
Right.
Thankful. But that's because I believe he saw the spirit of faith in me. I always had faith. The issue where I went wrong is I had faith in myself. And that makes it very hard, because it makes you very self-centered. And it makes that every problem you have is up to you to fix, which to some degree, I like that personal accountability and responsibility. God doesn't like slothfulness and laziness.
Right.
He doesn't reward that. It's very clear. However, being able to put some of that faith into him and being like, I know that you're going to guide me through these seasons. I've always been I left home at 15. I quit school. I had faith to do that. I started working a job where I was too young to even be working, and I lied about my age. There was a faith that I was going to do that. There was a faith to moving away from my into the six-figure career to start online coaching and personal training, which was a very, very crazy thing to do back in 2012. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah.
Right? I had faith in that. I had faith to move my life and open my gym. I had faith to, do all these different things. Right? And now having a North Star to that just makes it even easier.
So you're saying that you were able to do all those things without that connection back then, right? Did I get that right?
Yep.
So then I can only imagine how much stronger it is for you right now.
It's crazy, bro. And that's why I've gone through such a whirlwind in the last year, because it's so clear to me. And there's almost like a shame that I carry, because stuff is so clear to me now.
Yeah.
That I didn't see then. And because I'm intellectual, and once I understand something, I understand something very deeply.
Right.
It upsets me that I missed the mark so bad. But I know that everything happens for a reason. And I know that the Lord loves all of us. He just doesn't trust all of us.
Right.
So what I've been doing is earning his trust, because I felt frustrated my whole life that I have this potential that I believe can change the world living inside of me. But I've never been able to actualize it in the way that I felt I should. But when your worldview is very self-centered, it's easy to think like, well, what can I do? What things can I manipulate? And what wheels can I grab and turn? And what that can do, admittedly, if you want some real talk, that can have you look at people as instruments to get to the next stages. And then that's what you get in return, because that's how you're seeing people. And so now I try to go into situations as, what can I give? And I have to be more selective about where I'm putting myself, because otherwise people will just try to take from me. And so if I put myself in the right scenarios, what can I give? And usually things will come back. And so that's allowed me to walk in that faith a little bit more diligently and trusting. And a lot of the anxieties that I had from scarcity, that's the difference. Walking with the Lord, with walking with myself, I wouldn't say the outcomes are highly different. It's how I feel in those on the process to those outcomes, right? Because I've always been striving at kind of a, there's definitely some places where the plane takes a crash and you have to come back up like a stock market,
right?
But it's always been trending upwards,
right?
However, for right now, one of the things that I'm very interested in is business and building, legacy. And so the more I was able to create from what I felt was my doing, the more scarce I was. So the more I had, the more I was feeling scared that I was going to lose it all, which essentially drove me insane up until the point I found the Lord. And now, honestly, like and I have such a good group of brothers who I'm doing this with, if I woke up and all of our money was gone, I would look at them and go like, I guess we're drinking water on the street now until we figure out how to rebuild this all. Like I would just restart tomorrow.
Yeah.
And yes, it would be sad and stuff, but I'm telling you right now, I would just do, if he felt like he needed to take it from me to teach me something, I would find what he was looking for to teach me, and then I would just rebuild.
Yo, that is like the best thing I've ever heard. Like so good. So I know we're close to wrapping up here. One last thing, brother. I know you mentioned that you made that jump into getting a little bit more faith-based. Was there something there that catapulted you into doing so, if you don't mind me asking?
Pain. So for me, kind of coming to that, and I've talked about this in my own podcast before too, but like, I think when you're young, you want life to hurry up. It feels like it's not going fast enough.
Right.
You're 15, you're 20, even, around 25. It's like, okay, well, I have all these ideas and things, and everyone has different passions and things that they want to see. But I think everyone feels a sense of this where it's like, I don't want to listen to my parents anymore. And then it kind of goes to like, I don't want to listen to this boss. I want this career. We're always kind of like striving. And because I felt like I had this potential, but it was so far-fetched that it would be actualized, because I'm a realist. So it's like, okay, a high school dropout from a town of 300 people, and I start looking at really what my life was, and it was like, well, how are you going to make global impact? It's very unlikely, right? But I felt like something underlying that, that there was something there. And so when I started to cultivate all the things that deep down I was driven from scarcity, that I never truly believed I would get, once they started to become real. So for instance, I thought that one day if I could have my own gym, that was just a nice gym, that I would, that would be everything to me. Yeah, but then I got to 32 years old and it's happening right in front of my eyes. Well, I'm not dead at 32. And I start to realize that thing amongst things with my physique and all these metrics in which I was chasing, I was ticking off the boxes and feeling more empty than ever. And so the path that I thought that I was going to go down to find salvation, to create this peace in my soul that I had been craving my whole life, and hundreds of hours of therapy included in that, didn't really do it. Things helped. Any solution helps. Anything that you're doing less stupid is going to help. Right? So it helped, but it never quite quenched the thirst. And, through contention in some relationships and just different things that I had gone through, I woke up this spring feeling more sad than ever. And to the first time in my life where it was so strong that, self-harm was never thought of to me before. And all of a sudden that voice, that spirit started to try and come, which now in retrospect, I know that was the devil trying to keep me from becoming who I'm supposed to become. Because I view life as a story. And we all have a story of greatness if we allow ourselves to go through the things that will delve that out of us, right? So there's kind of a saying that the struggle builds us, and it does to some degree. But I actually like to rephrase that and think that the struggle reveals us. And I think that most people have just turned away from the struggles that are going to make them become who they were potentially supposed to be. And one thing that really scared me is, in a good way, was I had someone ask me, like, it's the end of your life and you're going to meet the Lord and he shows you everything that you could have been. Bro, no way am I leaving this earth like that.
Right.
It's not happening. And, I was lucky to find my spiritual mentor, Jamie. And as him and I, he's one of my best friends, as we got closer, I started to feel these holes fill that I thought these worldly things were going to fill. And it wasn't. It was a missing of the spirit. And now it's so apparent to me, and sometimes painful, working in the bodybuilding space where this is missing a lot, because I can just see it, I can smell it. And I don't mean that from condemnation. Right. I mean that from a place of deep understanding, where I can see a lot of people chasing things that aren't going to bring them what we think. And this is I'll try not to take up too much of your time, but this is interesting. So I became aware of that, right? But that awareness just caused me to want to understand. Right. And so, because I was like, well, my equation was all wrong. I thought X equals this is going to equal this.
Bodybuilding.
It didn't, right? It was wrong.
Yeah.
And so I needed to come up with a new, and that's painful to accept, because We see the world through a story. And if you shut down one story, now you're left with the unknown and nothing. And that produces a lot of negative emotion, which is why people go back to their old story. Because it's better to have a shitty story than no story in the short term. And so when I started to realize this, I dug into what that actually means. And I believe that the human spirit does not have an option to not have a belief or faith. Our experience on earth is not one, you don't get to like turn that fuse off. If you think you don't believe in something, you're just not thinking. You believe in something, and something is guiding you. You just probably don't know what. And so when I started orienting myself to the purest thing that I could, and I thought, what better story is there to follow than the striving towards the highest good? Because people will often say that they don't understand what that means. And it's like, well, do you believe in evil? Most people will say yes, because there is evil things that we see. Yes, but if we use science, Newton's law, for every outcome and action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. So if I can believe and see the evil, that means I have to believe and see the good too. And so I'm just trying to orient myself to be able to see that and act accordingly in the world.
Bro, there's like so many nuggets in here. My brain can't keep up. I don't even know how to respond to all of this. It's so good. If you guys are listening, make sure you guys are taking notes, because there's so much to learn here. Brother, there's so many more things that we could dive into, but for the sake of time, is there anything else that you want to share here before we wrap up?
I don't think so, man. I appreciate you bringing me on and, giving me a little bit of a voice to share some of these ideas. And I'm really proud of you, and I'm proud of us for the relationship we've built. And, it's been an absolute pleasure. You have tons of potential no matter what you choose to do in your life. And, it's inspiring for me to see young men having a hunger for these types of discussions.
Yeah.
Because it's something that I really, really could have used, especially growing up in a small place where that's not really the case. Everyone just sort of does what their family did. And a lot of times that was, poverty and drinking and abuse and a lot of different things. And I know you've walked through a bunch of different seasons in your life that, you're changing generational curses, bro. And I'm proud of you for it. It's really fun to watch and be a part of. So thank you.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. And it wouldn't be possible without your help. Truthfully, there's a lot there that we could, really step back and look at. And I'm really proud of what we're doing here as well. And I resonate with so much of what you said, just kind of having that innate knowingness and understanding that, I have these capabilities, and it would be a waste for me not to act upon that. And I'm not afraid to have these conversations, because I understand, like you said before, I'm aware that they need to be had. You can't just brush them under the rug. And it takes, guys like us to have the courage to speak on that a little bit more frequently, because you never know how it can impact somebody else. And that's what it's all about, right? So
the impacting someone else is really important. So I will leave you with this, because you said something very insightful. Reaching for that actualized potential that lives in all of us, we often feel as a very selfish endeavor. And I don't mean that I mean that in like, we view it as like us. And even if you have faith, it's us and God, right? It's an individual thing. However, when you pull that back, I view there as a moral civic responsibility underlying that.
Right.
And so that's why I like pushing people, because imagine all the people that come into contact with you. I have a big imagination, so I can imagine my life at the same time on two different time branches, essentially. And I look at some of the paths that I was on in my life and how I impacted people that I came into contact with from, let's say, 15 to 25 years old. And I imagine myself continuing down those similar paths throughout the course of my life. What was the impact that every person that came into my life, whether in my closest circle or my most distant circle, had, and what did they take from it? Versus now, if I'm orienting myself to the highest good and striving for my highest potential, what is the likelihood that others are going to see that in me? And yes, some people are going to want to punish it because it hurts to look at. But later, they often come to a realization that they have it in themselves. Do you know how many people I've seen that didn't like me for whatever reason? They didn't even know me. And then 4 years later, be like, you know what, I have to say sorry to you because I, said these things or I did these things. And in reality, I was just really uncomfortable with the way that you were presenting things, because deep down, I knew that that's where I was at. And I knew that I needed to make the change there, right? So we'll often mirror what we see. And it's important to know that, because, like when and I'm sorry to take up your time, but
no, dude, you're good. You're good.
When I looked at getting in shape, okay, yes, for sure. And I'm gonna be straight. I was a 23-year-old male, newly single, 22. Of course, I wanted to be in shape because I wanted female attention and I wanted to be
yeah, me too.
seriously. And, of course, all of that.
Yeah.
For sure. But as I got deeper into it, and that doesn't sustain you, that's the thing.
Right.
That's not a long-term sustaining thing. As I got into it more, I started to realize a few things that I had this realization once I started to see that I could actually do it. I was like, holy man, I'm going to be the first FNUF in 2 generations to not be obese. And if it stops with me, the future generations, maybe it stops. And so I put that on my back. So when people now ask me like, well, how do you keep on top of your fitness? Or how do you not do these things? It's like, because I don't want my family legacy diverted from what it could have been because of my hedonistic desire to have that plate of food.
Oh, man.
And I don't mean that with condemnation, but I'm not there.
Right.
Like, that's not where my plane of thinking is ever in anything. And I don't look at my experience in the world as the only one that exists. How many stories in the Bible did people sacrifice? Maybe they died or lived through a challenge, and then 2 generations later, God rewards their entire bloodline because of their sacrifice.
Right.
Right? So I don't just look at what I'm here to collect in my short window of this meat sack. It's lineage. It's what's come before, and it's what's come after.
Yo, like, I can't even begin to express my gratitude for this conversation because, like, it just lands so much for me too. Like, a big thing for my family is abuse when it comes to substances. For me, it's a big reason why I'm sober. Is because, like, I want to be able to kill that habit, and I don't want to pass that down. Because you see how much pain comes with that, how much frustration and so much negativity stems from those decisions. And it's like, if I see that and I recognize that and I'm aware of that, those things are causing it, how can I continue that behavior? And I think this is really interesting though, just how some people will say to their kids that they could be and do whatever they want, but then they're not willing to do that for themselves. And it's like having that responsibility and knowing it and continuing to show up every day to work on that, I think is a true skill set. And I think that's why we have these conversations. We do what we do. That's why I believe in coaching. Cause like you said, I think it was in the middle, like everybody has these things that they want to do, but gets lost in the application. That's where the accountability of a coach comes into play, because you're always going to try and push the envelope and have somebody to revert back to say, hey, you should be doing this. You could be doing that. And just even that alone, pushes people past that. And that's what it's all about, man. So this was so good.
That accountability that you talked about, bro, with
yeah,
kind of and exactly. So the substance thing, I didn't even know that about you. So I appreciate you sharing.
Yeah.
Bro, if you play that thought experiment out with me, it's like your children, their children's children. What does their path look like? Because that is no longer a spirit of darkness that engulfs the family. Because you took it on your back and decided to do very difficult work that people are not going to understand that come with it.
Yeah, and that was
the difficulty that it takes to be able to break curses is one that you have to do with the walk of faith.
Right.
And that's why I know most people don't believe, because if I was to ask them, hey, like we'll take my family, for example. If I was to ask a lot of members of my family, do you think my life is better if I'm 2 years old and can talk? And I asked my dad, do you think my life is better not being obese? He would say, for sure. It's going to be better if you were not obese.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then if I was to tell him, as let's say a 2-year-old that could talk, Dad, knowing that I'm going to do what I see, not what I hear, why is it that you don't act in belief? Because his actions to continue carrying on the way that he was meant that his belief wasn't there.
Right.
Or his belief in the wrong thing was there, I guess is a better way of putting it.
Yeah.
Right. And so if he actually believed that my life would be better, he would have acted out a different path for himself. And so I believe so deeply that the future generations and my own life on earth is better with a better health and consciousness. That's why I work so hard to develop it, so I can pass on a gift, not a curse.
A gift, not a curse. And that's why I'm so heavily invested in coaching and mentorship myself. I know you mentioned you have spent, three, 400 grand, I think it was. I'm around like 200K right now over the course of a few years for that reason. And I went to college. I got my degree. It's usually hanging up back there. I had to put it away because, 5 years of college, 50K later for what? I don't know. But I'm talking post graduation after getting my bachelor's degree, another 200 grand and trying to develop myself is because I see the purpose behind that and how much it matters, and bringing all of that together. It's like there's no coincidence why we have the things, or I should say the results that we have or the lack thereof, because of the choices that we're making every single day. And it's just, I think having that awareness doesn't happen by mistake, and that's why investing in yourself is huge. So I'm sure there's a lot more that we can get into. Is there anything else on that? I mean, fuck, man, this was so good.
This is very good. Just one last thing, because I was brought college, right? So when you're thinking about investing in a coach or a mentor or anything, it doesn't matter if it's business or personal, like life coaching type stuff, or fitness coaching, or a combination of all of it.
Mm-hmm.
We're okay to pay $50,000, $60,000, $100,000 to go learn something that half the time most people even inherently know is not going to be very useful after they're done with it.
Such bullshit.
And I mean, I don't need to get into that whole conversation, but you could spend 1/10 of the cost for a year or two of fitness or whatever it is, business, lifestyle coaching, depending on your interests and your goals. And there's basically someone to help with everything now because of the internet.
Yeah.
And probably be 10x further than you might have otherwise been. So we're okay to humble ourselves to go learn from some dickhead at a business school who never made a business, which makes no sense to me, but then be very hesitant to invest in people who have actually done it. And I believe because of and I think there's going to be a resurgence of the faith. That's my prediction. Because of the lack of faith, we've stopped listening to what we see with our eyes. Right? And so I made a very controversial post a while ago on my threads about sexual impurity. And so many people were defending, promiscuity, essentially. And it was like, what sources do you have? And so I was just like, the New Living Translation, the English Standard Version, the New King James. I just named all the denominations of the written text of the Bible, and I was like, here, it's all in here, actually.
Yeah.
And it's the oldest book that we have. So, we don't need a study for everything. And I love data. I've been a nerd my whole life. I like knowing things, but sometimes we have to believe what we're seeing in front of our eyes and act accordingly. So
you think that gap of trust in the marketplace is due to a lack of faith, essentially, is what you're saying?
I think so, because I think what happens is okay, I'll leave you with this. I'm gonna grab something for you.
Let's go. Told you guys this was gonna be a good one. Come on now.
So, and I want to ask you a question.
Go ahead.
And there's no right or wrong answer to this. So this is a Bible. This is a book. Why has this book, amongst all the other books, amongst most of the books besides a few, and why has this remained a staple in modern humanity all the way back to Genesis, the creation? Why this book versus other books, do you think?
It's the undeniable stack of proof of the Lord and the situation. Well, I should say the examples of all the things that he's done.
That's right. And what those examples are equal to is a hyperlinked book that is a story.
Right.
And we see the world through a story. You don't not get to. And so when you become self-absorbed, and we have lack of faith, and I know this from experience, the spirit of adventure starts to die. And that adventure is what's calling us forward into the unknown. And the reason that this book is so useful is because it's a story that you can orient yourself against and feel good and feel like you're actually moving in the right directions. If it's just Dillon's story that I'm trying to cultivate through my means of my own hedonistic desires, that's why you end up in a position that I was in, where you get a bunch of stuff that doesn't feel the way you thought it should feel.
Right. Fuck, bro. We might have to run this back because there's so much that you said that I feel like we need to expand on, and there's just not enough time to do it.
Yeah, we can do another one soon, bro.
Yeah, because like there's so much between bodybuilding alone, then you have the spirituality, the faith, the coaching stuff, mentorship. I mean, there's so many avenues, man, and just the way that you communicate is awesome. I feel like I'm getting smarter by the minute here, which is awesome.
I appreciate you, bro. Me too.
So this is great, bro. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have, man. Is there anything else you want to add here?
No, that's it. We'll leave it at that.
That was good, guys. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Coach, where could they find you?
On Instagram, I guess, if you want to connect. Just Dillon, just my name. We have a YouTube channel, and I have a couple different podcasts. I have a faith and mindset-based podcast that definitely touches on fitness and a bunch of other modalities called Why Not Us. I do that with my close friend and pastor, which is really interesting to have kind of an ex-criminal, high school dropout entrepreneur talking to a pastor who's been walking with the Lord for 27 years and kind of comparing experiences. So It provides a very interesting dynamic. And then I have our fitness-based Trademark Physique podcast as well, where we dive into definitely mindset stuff and basically anything that comes up in good conversation, but a lot more fitness-based. And that's where my best ideas are fleshed out in the medium to short, long form format content.
Yeah.
I make short form content because the marketplace kind of demands it in some sense. It's the way that the chessboard is set up right now.
Yeah.
But for me, 30 to 60 seconds is very difficult to condense a lot of my thoughts down into and get them out in a coherent manner.
For sure. Also, when you guys follow him, make sure to join his broadcast channel because he drops a lot of really good nuggets in there. I'm constantly looking at that too. Coach, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. This was amazing. And I look forward to chatting with you more soon.
Thanks, bro. Appreciate you.
All right, brother. Enjoy your day. Chat soon. Bye. Let's go. That was so good. You guys need to listen to that like 5 times. So many nuggets. Appreciate you guys. Have an amazing day. Talk to you soon.